Before I begin, I want to say two things. Most importantly, there will be no spoilers in this video. All the footage you're about to see is captured during the first 3 chapters, and cutscenes are kept to a minimum. Secondly, as you'll hopefully find out by the end, this isn't going to be your typical Death Stranding review.
What the hell? Didn't mean to grab you so hard.
So with the warnings done, I'll continue with the confession. In a way, I feel like I'm cheating with this video. If you watched my channel intro, you'll know that this channel is meant to be a video account of me tackling my gaming backlog. Typically, when someone talks about finishing their backlog, that usually conveys they're either recovering from a severe case of constipation,
Nice.
or playing much older games and not something that was released a little over a month ago. I will admit that as a fledgling YouTube channel covering a highly anticipated, polarizing, and somewhat controversial game, this is a good way to attract viewers and hopefully subscribers. However, combined with a full-time job, actually wanting to finish the game, and 10 ounces of procrastination, I think it's safe to say I've missed out on the hype wave.
No. Great. Fuck.
That's okay though, because as the first proper video on this luggage-themed game channel, this game fits. I mean, the main premise is hauling carry-on-sized containers across a beautiful and haunting world. Okay, they're not as flashy as, say, Mama's Paisley one, but hey, porters can't be choosers. Speaking of style and flash, let's start with the game's graphics. Long story short, the game is stunning, and honestly, you certainly don't need me to say that. The world is cinematic, though melancholy. Its look and feel is meticulous. The locales can convey emotions of hope and serenity, and then further along dramatically change to fear and despair. The changing weather also feels natural and fluid. I also love how the terrain evolves gradually as you traverse the country from east to west, and it introduces new challenges along the way. My only issue with the art style is the variety in cities and structures. On approach, they differ slightly from the outside, but once inside they are almost identical. Additionally, the holographic interaction with most inhabitants feels cheap and generic.
Thank you, Sam.
This doesn't help you feel a connection with the dispersed population with whom you're meant to care about.
I appreciate you bringing me this. I do.
Storytelling through detailed and polished cutscenes is typical Kojima. His flair for over-exposition is definitely still present, but of course you knew that too. I for one didn't mind, and I've always been a fan of beautiful drawn-out cutscenes. It reminds me of my early days playing original PlayStation games where I could put down the controller for a second and be enthralled. The story is a slow burn, but its tempered unravelment is captivating. Cast and voice acting is on point, Mads Mikkelsen puts on a great performance, and kudos to his well-deserved win at the Game Awards this year.
BB, can you hear me?
Speaking of the cast, I did find some of the characters' names are a little too on the nose.
Call me Dead Man. I'm well acquainted with the dead.
Music and sound is brilliant. The soundtrack selection definitely complements the game, and I appreciate the fact that music from lesser-known artists, at least to me, were chosen. I found myself listening to the game's soundtrack outside of gameplay. In addition to the music, sound effects also add to the immersion and sci-fi appeal. The whir of your trike barreling along the highway, rain patter on your cloak, and your Ododrek's directional flapping and Get the hell out of here swirling rotation. It all sounds amazing. Speaking of the Odradek, I feel like it's the unsung hero of this game.
Yeah, I feel you.
While BB gets a lot of attention as your cute travel companion, it seems that our starfish friend gets left out in the cold. I love that Kojima gave this piece of equipment some personality, whether it's clapping or giving me a thumbs up for successfully clearing the BT section. Or turning itself into a mobile while I soothe and rock my BB. Its personification is imaginative, and its inanimate companionship with Sam reminded me of the Wilson Ball in Castaway. Furthermore, the Odradek has a literary connection to a 1919 short story called The Cares of a Family Man. It's definitely interesting, and I recommend you check it out. Anyway, this isn't the Odradek review, and I'll stop gushing. If you can't already tell, I'm delaying the inevitable. That big elephant in the room with the word gameplay tattooed on its forehead. Well, so how is the gameplay? I think everyone knows by now what to expect. With well over a month since the game's release, you either know if it is or isn't for you. Okay, the aforementioned sounds more like the beginning of a cop-out and not an actual answer, so I'll be honest. The gameplay was a tad underwhelming. Okay. Very underwhelming. And disappointing. But wait, before you do anything, hear me out. Some have characterized this game as a walking simulator, but I would have to disagree with that. To me, this felt more like extreme Google Maps, plotting your course through an unforgiving terrain. Almost every reviewer of this game will tell you the initial 10 hours are a slug, and I'm afraid to say I didn't feel any different. While playing in the beginning, I believed this was done on purpose, with the intention of wanting you to experience and understand the hardship of this ill-fated world. However, video games by their nature should be fun and engaging, and this rough start only enforces a tolerance toll that will turn away a lot of gamers. Honestly, I don't fault anyone for being bored or the criticism this game has received. It's all very valid. I also question whether I would finish the game. However, the draw of the story was enough for me to push on. That is, until one point during Chapter 3. The game and its mechanics started to weigh on me. I was bored shuffling back and forth between settlements. It was then that I saved one last time and quit. It was time to shelf the game and YouTube the story. Okay, Sam, go ahead. I consulted the IKEA shelf gods to pick what my next game would be, all the while trying to ignore the giant Death Stranding Collector's Edition box I plunked down for. I could feel Norman Reedus' cold stare and BB's look of abandonment. Despite the guilt trip, I stood firm by my decision and picked up my next game.
Let me say this again. I ain't no goddamn Nazi.
And holy crap, this game.
Hello, big boy. Come to test the old man's mettle.
Now, I know what you're thinking. This is a Death Stranding video, what are you doing? But just hold that thought for a second, because this game would be what I needed for Death Stranding. Wolfenstein Shadow of the Colossus. BJ Blazkowicz is transported to an old world where he must now fight his greatest battle, Nazi Colossi. Okay, clearly I meant Wolfenstein 2, The New Colossus. Also, I'll admit that in my original Photoshop picture, I put little Nazi symbols where the weak spots are. I felt maybe that was going a bit too far, and my inner child who fondly remembers playing this game may have been scarred indefinitely. Okay, all jokes aside, Wolfenstein 2 is phenomenal, and really deserves its own video. After a hard day's work avoiding lethal rain, the worst beach trips ever, and delivering packages to the most inconsiderate homeowners in America, I would come back to my private shelter, kick my feet up and dual wield, chain gun, flamethrower, and laser the hell out of some Nazis. I know this is an unusual tangent, but indulge me if you will. I highly recommend Wolfenstein 2. It combines excellent trigger-happy gameplay, a thrilling roller coaster story, and a fun cast of characters. I can't say enough good things about it. If you haven't played this game, do yourself a favor and pick it up. I also recommend going through the first game, The New Order, beforehand. Okay, so what the hell is Wolfenstein 2 doing in a Death Stranding review? I know the staunchest of Death Stranding fans may already be reaching for the dislike button if they haven't already closed this video. Well, after taking some time off, the lure of wanting to experience and finish the story myself started to kick in. But there was still that feeling of being burnt out. For me, Death Stranding needed a side game, something I could do to let loose between deliveries, and that game for me happened to be Wolfenstein 2.
We make a good team, you and I.
Oh shit.
To me, Death Stranding was best experienced in bursts, like a great TV show tuned into periodically. So, feeling refreshed and renewed, I booted up my game and continued my journey rebuilding America.
Good morning, Sam. Blood collection complete. Thank you for your generosity.
After finishing the mission that caused me to quit, I would be introduced to the game's latest evolution that would also help. A motorway. Glorious motorway that would allow me to whiz past those damn mules who annoyed me only moments ago. While enjoying my time rampaging through this beautiful highway built by fellow selfless players, something clicked for me. I started to understand why I was meant to struggle. It was all for the chiral network and Death Stranding's social aspect. Now, I certainly won't argue that the tedious initial gameplay is merited for its payoff, because it definitely isn't. It only serves to frustrate and distance players from the game. However, before I get too deep into my personal revelation and the social chiral network, allow me to pause that thought for a moment. I want to get to the social gameplay of Death Stranding, but before I do, I want to touch on Death Stranding's foes before I sing about its heroes. Alright, so while you won't be up against Nazis or Colossi, you will be spending your time skirting around relentless marauders called mules and tiptoeing cautiously between the monstrous BT entities. For me, the mules were the weakest antagonists by far. Until the game equips you with the necessary weaponry and tools to defend yourself, your only valid option is to flee unless you want to risk your cargo. While cargo face checking a mule is always satisfying, it is discouraged. I was always adamant about delivering my packages in immaculate condition and outright avoided contact whenever possible. Once the availability of trikes was unlocked, it was always fun to race through encampments, flaunting your cargo along the way knowing there was nothing they could do. By far, though, the most satisfying experience was to sneak into a mule camp, find one of their post boxes, and rob them blind. Then, after a quick auto range, power-leg it out of there with all their cargo strapped to your back like you're breaking a fucking giraffe out of the zoo. I loved parking my trike just outside their perimeter and using it for the perfect getaway. In contrast to the largely dull mules, the BT encounters is where the game shines. These set pieces are chilling as you carefully navigate Sam through these monstrous minefields, pausing between gasps of air and quick scans. I love the breath-holding mechanic, and it certainly intensifies these moments. The sound of your Odrodeck swirling violently, letting you know you're not in the clear, as your air gauge chimes its near depletion. One wrong step, one moment of panic, and it could all be over, leaving you to stomp your way to freedom. To be fair, the BT sections aren't tough, with no major consequences for small blunders. Once you realize their simplicity, it does detract from the overall intensity. I, however, suckered myself into a false sense of security each time and tried to avoid any detection. The BTs themselves are some of the most interesting and creative looking enemies I've seen in a game, and I love the use of their hands for footprints. Also, succumbing to a BT's grasp usually resulted in a unique boss enemy. Granted, these boss encounters are difficult, but the designs were always imaginative. I just wish their bite matched their bark.
You're on the menu.
So lastly, it's time to unpause my thoughts about the game's social aspect. As I said before, this is what cemented the game for me. In the first few hours of gameplay, the irony of Sam's responsibility is apparent. While his burden is to connect others via the chiral network, this duty isolates him from those he is connecting. In this way, I always felt somewhat disjoint from the world of Death Stranding, until that is, I connected to the chiral network. Once connected, you are able to leverage and provide support to other real-life players without direct play interaction. If another player places a ladder, drops a rope, or builds a bridge, these can make an appearance in your game. A payoff for me wasn't necessarily linking these remote cities, it was knowing that a ladder or rope I laid down, or a bridge or road I helped to complete, was beneficial to other players. There were plenty of times I took a wrong turn while trying to escape a group of mules, or backed my way to a cliff edge to avoid a BT, only to find a life-saving bridge or rope anchor placed down by another player who went the same unfortunate way. At one point in the game, I had placed a ladder to climb up a mountain to avoid a group of BTs. This ladder would prove to be a terrible decision and resulted in me having to fall and stumble my way back down, damaging much of my cargo. When I returned to the same general location during a side mission, I made it a point to find my ladder to nowhere and dismantle it, hopefully preventing future players from following in my misstep. Knowing that I could mess up someone else's escape, and the fact that it even mattered to me, is a testament to this game. Yes, the graphics are amazing. Check, the combat is uninspiring. The BTs are creative, the mule encounters are dull. Indeed, the story is gripping, and unfortunately many will find the core gameplay dry and tedious. But the fact that I went out of my way to remove a virtual ladder astounds me. All the initial hardship you experience is there to provide you with an understanding of the harshness of this world, and instill a sense of duty to alleviate that adversity for others. Whether this point could have been really made without dragging players through an arduous 6 to 10 hours is up for debate. I personally believe it could have. However, if you're driven to find out the story for yourself, and have that side game to break up the monotony, then absolutely give Death Stranding a chance. It's not for everyone, but if you're like me, and always looking for that new, different gaming experience, this is it. I encourage you to at least give it a shot if you can. Well, with Death Stranding and Wolfenstein 2 complete, I can scratch 2 off my backlog. I really hope you enjoyed my debut video. It was fun and a lot more work than I expected, but I'm definitely ready for round 2. Please leave me a comment if possible. I'd really like to know what I'm doing right and wrong. So, thanks for watching, and take care. Oh, for fuck's sake. That's it.